Hello, and welcome back to Bigfoot Lake. Tonight we share a Bigfoot encounter that's been passed down generation after generation. It's one of those rock-solid encounters that survives the test of time. This is the story of four prospectors who were in the state of Alaska looking for nothing else than gold. So that's our topic for tonight, but before we get started, I have just a few personal words I'd like to say. Bigfoot Lake the last few days has been, well, I guess, very busy. I want to personally thank Nance from Buckeye Bigfoot. Nance, your kindness it's overwhelming. It truly is. You have such a great heart, and what you're doing to help people is it's a really good thing. If you haven't ever been to Nance's channel, Buckeye Bigfoot, it is an amazing channel. It's a great place to be and hear stories. So I highly encourage you check out Buckeye Bigfoot. But Nance, thank you for suggesting my channel, Bigfoot Lake, for your followers to come check out. The SAS Squad, as Nance calls them, they came over in full force, and let's just say I've been very busy replying to comments for a couple days now. I'm very humbled by all this, and I just want to let all of you know who were part of that. You guys make a big impact on people's lives. It was truly a blessing, and I just want to thank each and every one of you guys and let you know that it really meant a lot. So thanks, Nance, and thanks to the family over at Buckeye Bigfoot for doing what you do. It's quite amazing. So with all of that said, let's dive into our story for tonight. So pull up a stump, sit back, relax, and let's hear this story from Wrangell, Alaska from 1900. The spring of 1900 found four men batching together in a shack in Wrangell, Alaska. All four were broke, as is usual with prospectors. As luck would have it, I was one of the four. I will just call the other three John, Charlie, and Fred. Charlie came into the shack one night in April, all excited, and said, "Fellows, I've been on the trail of an old Indian for the last month, trying to get him to tell me where he picked up a piece of free gold quartz he has at his camp. I never said anything about it before because I wanted to get the story from him first. And today he spilled the beans. He told me to go up to Thomas Bay and camp on Patterson River on the right side. Travel upriver for about 8 miles and then turn to the high mountains. And after traveling about 1.5 miles, I would find a lake shaped like a half moon. Plenty of stone like I found on a slide there. This area is known for landslides. And Thomas Bay is actually known by the Native Americans in Alaska as the Bay of Death. So about 150 years ago, a landslide down one of the mountains wiped out a village, killing over 500 of the inhabitants. Well, of course, a prospector is ready to stampede on a whisper of gold any place, and we were no exceptions to the rule. We all talked the matter over and finally decided to send Charlie over to look at the prospect. While he was gone, John, Fred, and myself would hustle work on another stake to pay off the old one. The forepart of May, Charlie loaded his outfit into a canoe, and having favorable weather, he left Wrangell for Thomas Bay, which lies northwesterly about 50 miles. He had 3 months' supplies, but was to come back any time sooner if he found anything. If he didn't show up in that time, we were to put out a search for him. John and Fred took a contract to get out wood, and I got a job in the Wrangell sawmill. Things went along until the first part of June, when on a Sunday in the late afternoon, we all being home, and in walks Charlie, without a coat, or hat and looking as if he'd been through hell. He didn't give us any greeting whatever. He just heaved a big piece of quartz over into a corner of the room and said, "Get me something to eat. I'm all in, and I want to rest." The fellow looked it, and after he had eaten, he turned in without telling us a thing about his trip. We picked up the piece of quartz and said, "Boy, it sure was a pretty thing to look at for a prospector." It was shot through with gold specks, just like a badly freckled-faced kid. Were we excited? I'll say we were. Just before dark, we walked down to the beach to bring Charlie's outfit, as he had come up to the shack with only that piece of quartz in his hand. But there was nothing in the canoe except the oars. Not much sleep for us that night, but Charlie never stopped sawing wood. We had hard work getting Charlie up for breakfast the next morning, but when he did roll out, he just ate, borrowed a coat and hat, and left the house without saying a word or even answering one question out of the many put to him by us. All of us being excited and feeling ourselves worth a fortune, we didn't go to work that day, but sat around the shack and passed that blamed piece of rock back and forth to each other while we talked and waited for Charlie to come back and make his report. Believe me, we were anxious to hear it. Along in the afternoon, he came in and said, "Fellows, the SS Drigo will be on her way south early tomorrow morning. Can you give me enough money for my ticket to Seattle? I'm through with Alaska, and I never want to see it again. I'll tell you about my trip to Thomas Bay and where I found that quartz, but my advice to you is to forget about it. It will never do you any good and will only cause you a lot of mental and physical pain. If we were not partners, I would never open my lips about this trip or what I found. But if you promise never to mention my name in connection with what I will tell you, or mention the name of Thomas Bay to me again, I'll give you the straight of my experience up there. Judge for yourselves as to my saneness, because this is the most astounding thing you ever heard, and as far as I'm concerned, is beyond me to reason it out. Don't ask any questions to prolong my story any longer than it takes to tell it, as I want to leave Alaska and forget it if I can. I will try to make the one telling plain enough. This is Charlie's story. The first night after leaving Wrangell found me in Ideal Cove. Next night I reached Muddy River in time to make camp again. The third night I hit Ruth Island in Thomas Bay. I spent the next day looking up Patterson River for a suitable place for a good camp, which I found a quarter of a mile from Tidewater on the right-hand side, looking up the river. I broke camp on Ruth Island the next day and moved up to the place I picked out the day before. I put up my tent, packed up my outfit, and left the canoe on the riverbank. The next day I spent cooking beans, cutting wood, and making things comfortable for a long stay. As it looked like rain, I wanted to get things fixed to keep dry. It started to rain that night, and it just kept it up for days. I lost track of time, as each day was like the one before. Had nothing to read. I was all alone. I couldn't do anything without getting soaked. The roar of the river and the wind through the timber just about drove me bugs, so I put in most of my time sleeping. Finally, the weather broke, and I got out. I spent several days in trying to find the old Indians' Half Moon Lake, but I couldn't get it spotted. I did find about 2 miles from camp up the river and about a mile from it, a lake shaped like the letter S. On the creek coming out of the lower end, I panned some pretty good colors, but as I figured, not enough to get excited about. Yet, it was an indication of gold in the country. Talk about a dead country. That sure is. There doesn't seem to be any life in there at all. You spend all day in the timber without seeing a squirrel. I was getting sort of tired of beans, rice, and bacon, so I made up my mind I would go over to a ridge about 8 miles east of the S Lake and get a few grouse, as I thought I could hear a few hooters up there when I was at the end of this lake. I left come the next morning, which was a fine sunny day. I took only the rifle with me, and when I came to the ridge, sure enough, there were a few grouse hooting. I shot 2 and had gotten them when I bagged another, which fell down the ridge about 100 yards before it hung up. While on my way down to pick it up, I found that piece of quartz. Up to that time, I'd paid very little attention to what the country I was in looked like, as it was so heavily timbered and brushy. The formation didn't show up, and I had no tools with me to uncover it. The top of an old snag had broken off and fallen, scraping the top moss and loose dirt for a space of about 8 feet wide and 18 or 20 feet long, uncovering this quartz ledge, which is where I found this piece. This ledge was worked smooth by a glacier at one time. I couldn't find anything to break a piece off with, so I used the butt of my gun to get that piece. In doing so, I broke the stock of my gun, thus ruining it for further use. This didn't worry me any, as I knew there was not any game in the country larger than a grouse, and damn few of them. My first thought was of the richness of the quartz, and of you fellows, and getting back to town to round you all up so we could get busy on it. After looking over and enjoying the feeling of knowing I had made a rich find, I covered the ledge up again with moss, limbs, and a rotten chunk. Finishing that job, I thought I would climb the ridge directly over the ledge and get my landmarks so I could come back to it again, or tell you where it was if anything should happen to me. This I did, climbing straight up over the ledge on the ridge till I reached the top, which was about 600 feet above where I found the ledge. I looked down below me and picked out a big tree with a bushy top, taller than the rest, and about 50 feet to the right of the ledge. Looking over the top of this tree from where I stood, I could see out over Frederick Sound, Cape of the Straight Line, the point of Vanderput Spit, Point Vanderput, and turning a little to the left, I could see Sequoia Island, Kodiak Island, from the mouth of Wrangell Narrows. Satisfied with that, I turned half round to get a back sight on some mountain peaks, and lying below me on the other side of the ridge from the ledge was the Half Moon Lake the Indian had told me about. Right there, fellows, I got the scare of my life. I hope to God I never see or go through the likes of it again. Swarming up the ridge towards me from the lake were the most hideous creatures. I couldn't call them anything but devils, as they were neither men nor monkeys, yet they looked like both. They were entirely sexless, their bodies covered with long, coarse hair, except where the scabs and running sores had replaced it. Each one seemed to be reaching out for me and striving to be the first to get me. The air was full of their cries, and the stench from their sores and bodies made me faint. I forgot my broken gun, and I tried to use it on the first ones. And then I threw it at them and turned and ran. God, how I did run. I could feel their hot breath on my neck. Their long claw-like fingers scraped my back. The smell from their steaming, stinking bodies was making me sick, while the noises they made, yelling, screaming, and breathing, drove me mad. Reason left me. How I reached the canoe, or how I hung onto that piece of quartz, is a mystery to me. When I came to, it was night. I was lying in the bottom of my canoe, drifting between Thomas Bay and Sequoia Island, cold, hungry, and crazy for a drink of water. But only to satisfy the latter urge, I started for Wrangell, and here I am. You no doubt think I am either crazy or lying. All I can say is, there is the quartz. Never let me hear the name of Thomas Bay again, and for God's sake, help me get away tomorrow on that boat. So passed out Charlie from our lives. We put his story down as a fantasy caused by loneliness and morbid thought. So that concludes the story for tonight. The story that goes all the way back to 1900. What do you guys think about Charlie's encounter up on this ridge with those creatures? Those creatures that were neither men nor monkey, yet looked like both, that were quickly climbing up that ridge after him. What do you think about that? Have you ever heard this story before? This is a classic encounter that's been passed down for over 100 years. So let me know in the comments what you think. This is just like Charlie's fellow miners. They're prospectors. They didn't know what to think of it either. So, also, if you're from this area, from Alaska or Thomas Bay or anywhere around there, let me know in the comments. Have you heard any other encounters up there or strange things, possibly even Bigfoot or anything out of the ordinary? I'd love to hear from you. So I want to thank each and everyone for being here tonight. Appreciate you all. Hope you all have a great night, and we'll see you on the next.